Hello there, and welcome to Sweet Child of Time. I'm your host, Steve Barnes, and I'm sitting here with your host of one of my stories. I'm going to bring her in right now, and she is your host of one of my stories. It's Lindsey Dunn. Ahoy there, Lindsey.
Ahoy, Steve. Methinks we're lost at sea without dark recaps. Arr. So we're gonna talk about dark some more. Arr.
Yeah, why not? I mean, we could talk about it till the cows come home. We're going to do it one more time. Thank you for thank you for doing this.
Yeah, we had to have a wrap up, right? I mean, we met
Yes.
through a wrap up. We met through our first episode
Mm-hmm.
we ever recorded together was a 1899 wrap. Well, that was the second. The first was
Mm-hmm.
an 1899 complaint session about Netflix deciding not to renew it with Nate. Then we wrapped up 1899. So we're going to wrap up Dark, of course.
Speaking of complaint sessions, yeah, on the dark Discord earlier today, I was lamenting how there is no new news whatsoever about the show Something is Killing the Children that's supposed to be in production.
Yeah.
Our boy, who is that fella that does all those great shows like Haunting of Hill House?
Mike Flanagan.
Mike Flanagan. He was originally supposed to be doing that show, Something is Killing the Children, and then he had a conflict of interest or something. Um, the show got handed over to Bo and Yante. There's been no new news since February of that, of like them. There's like no write ups about any casting or production notes or anything. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it, I'm worried. I'm very worried about that, Lindsay, because I want another Darkway show to come out.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, Mike Flanagan, I believe the deal was that his last show with Netflix was um the show that just came out.
Yeah, the Edgar
Um
Allan Poe one,
yeah,
we
it's
know
not
what
a
it
haunting.
is.
It's not a haunting of anything. It's
The Cask of Amarillo, no. Something
Oh
about a
my god.
house though. That's a house
Oh,
involved.
the Fall of the House of Usher. Yes,
There you
that's
go.
right.
Thank you. Between the
Yeah,
two
it's
of us.
made up of all the different short stories, but they've giant turned to one giant narrative. That was his last show, and he is now supposed to transition over to Prime Video. So he's gonna be a
Yeah.
shell for them from now on. And so then Netflix, I guess that's when Netflix turned to Bo and Yantia. But yes, I too keep doing the Google. I
Mhm.
was hoping since the writers' strike ended
Mhm.
and the acting strike, there might be an update, but they could still be recovering from the trauma of 1899. I'm not sure. We can only
Yeah,
speculate.
it is a recent wound. It really hasn't been that long. It's been like a year, and it seems like it's been longer, especially to us that have been like week to week, checking it out. But yeah, it is a
Mhm.
recent wound.
Yeah, it does make me wonder if because they really attempted, I feel, to stay so positive afterwards. There was
Yes, they
no
did.
negative emotions expressed towards Netflix, but it does make me wonder if since then they've had a change of heart or have been like, no, we don't want to work with them anymore. Who knows? I don't like to spread rumors, but so we're just gonna say that
I know
there's no updates. No updates at
TMZ is
all.
listening. They're gonna like clip our our words here, and we'll make headlines. I don't want that. Uh, we're doing dark chat today. You're my dark friend, Lindsay. That's why we're
Mhm.
back. We're doing some dark chat today, and some of the things we're going to be talking about this episode is I had a wacky conspiracy theory about Inez. Um, we were going to. I was going to discuss Alt Martha's timeline. And we were going to briefly touch on some things like the Stargate, maybe Agnes, Jonas, Mikkel's magic trick. Um, we really wanted to talk about some of the themes of the show and stuff like that. And feedback. We have actually feedback, Lindsay, which is wonderful. And not only feedback, but some more Sweet Child of Time news as we made the charts in another country. Like we don't make the charts in the United States, which is where we hail from. Um, we're usually on the charts in like Germany, Saudi Arabia, Poland, and there's one country I'm forgetting. But a new country has risen. We're now charting in Israel. So, I don't want to make anything political, but I welcome all of our listeners. Thank you for listening to Sweet Shot of Time. I wish you all well. I hope you and your family and all your neighbors are well. Thank you for listening to Sweet Shot of Time over there. It's neat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't looked at my charts lately, so that is good to hear that we've had some new listeners join in. And we before the episode started, you said we had some new friends we didn't realize that were knocking down the doors for more dark content. So we're gonna see what we can do.
That's right. It surprised me because, once we completed our dark journey and we released the last recap, I kind of plugged out there like, hey, we've done all these shows, so please check it out. And so I usually don't advertise on Discord, but I did for the dark group just to let them know that we had done it all. And a lot of people like chimed in. Sasura, I don't know if any of these people are male or female or whatever, but we have Sasura, Jimmy Gangster, Moody Blues, Green Has Risen, Angst, and Tigor. They all kind of chimed in and just gave us some suggestions, some of which we're going to talk about today. I think Green Has Risen suggested that we talk about the loop versus the one, what we call the one timers club, whether it's like a timeline that happens once, or if it like happens over and over again, which is what the show kind of leads us to believe. One of them asked us to go into that, so of course we will, because
Mhm.
they asked, Lindsay.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. We give the people what they want. We try to.
We beg them to give us ideas and feedback, and they've done it.
We haven't given it away to any door prizes yet. And we haven't given
That's
away
not
any
true.
promise to.
On the Sweet Child of Time, Wheel of Time, me and James gave away like the first 6 books in the Wheel of Time series to a listener, which was a lot of fun.
I do remember that, but I meant dark, specific things to
Yeah.
dark. But we haven't like gotten that desperate yet where we're saying, "Please write us. We'll give away a yellow rain jacket."
Wow, that's going big. I mean, actually, I think I have like a couple of yellow rain jackets in my closet, just randomly that don't fit anybody.
Mm.
I'm ready to get in some chat though. Do you want to start with the feedback, or should I go into my conspiracy theory about Inez?
We can do the feedback.
Okay. Hey, Steve from Sweet Shot of Time here to tell you about our latest sponsor, which is Zencastr. It's how we do our podcasts now. Zencastr is great for connecting with others because I can connect with other people. I got them all on screen with me. I can record them super easy. And the best thing about Zencastr is to me, the best thing is it records locally. So if I'm recording with someone and their Wi-Fi connection is weak or they're cutting in and out or something, it will still record everything they said perfectly. I might not be able to hear it while we're recording, but in the edit, all of it's there. I love it so much for that reason. I always get a good, strong connection with Zencastr. It makes it really easy to edit the podcasts afterwards. And I guess the main thing about Zencastr is, for me, it's free because I'm sponsored by them. But for you, you can start off getting 30% off if you use my promo code, which is Sweet Child of Time, and you can start out with that 30% off coupon. Now, there's some stuff that I have to tell you, and I'm going to tell you right now. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code Sweet Child of Time, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. If you want to have the same easy experience I do for all my podcasting and content needs, it's time to share your story. Woo! Sweet Child of Time is sponsored by Promoco RVA. Recreational use of marijuana is now legal in Virginia. But where do you get it? Google up Promoco RVA, that's spelled PROMOCO RVA, and schedule services with these guys. Sweet Child of Time can vouch for their professionalism and their products. They have wide varieties of vapes, flower, edibles, everything you can think of, and they're open from Monday to Saturday from 11 to 7, you can schedule your own appointment at your convenience, get verified online, and it's that simple. Promoco RVA for your Richmond, Virginia needs. Or if you're in DC, you can visit their storefront at 1813 18th Street Northwest. Or just check out the link in this description notes. Hey, Promoco, thanks.
We got a comment from Tania. And she actually left a couple comments, but one of them was reiterating how horrible Hannah was. We all know that. So, but there was one thing this she posted on the episode. I'm going to share that in a minute. But the feedback is I find it really strange that they picked Michael's suicide as the key moment that needs to be changed. It would make a lot more sense if it was Mikkel going missing that started everything. Any thoughts? Now, to be clear, this was posted on the episode 2.6 episode, which is a
Okay.
favorite episode of our users. And in that
Right.
episode, or actually, maybe it was 2.5. Anyway, it was the episode where Adam tells Jonas, go into this globe thing, and
Right.
travel
Right.
back to the day that your father committed suicide. That's the key moment. If you stop that,
Right.
then um then you'll stop everything from happening. So it wasn't exactly what you were saying. You made comments about the scene where they do the parallel worlds, and they showed Helge and Ulrich instead of Mikkel, and you were commenting on that. So we're not talking exactly
Right.
about the same thing, but it
Sure.
did
Sure.
strike me that, oh, this is interesting because Steve kind of was saying this as being a key moment. So I wrote
Yeah.
I wrote back to this commenter, but I wanted to
Oh,
know if you had something to say, Steve, before I do that.
well, sure. I mean, Tania chose a more succinct point in time
Mhm.
involving Mikkel, which would be Michael's suicide. Because that's like it's a finality thing. A life ends, a bunch of lives are changed. I was thinking it would be more of like Mikkel going missing and coming out of that cave because that's such like an iconic image of young Mikkel, emerging from the cave at like in the wrong time zone. So I was thinking, Mikkel traveling back in time, just because Mikkel just seems like he's the ideal like mascot of the show. Like we have kids like Elizabeth who are awesome too, but like that season one Mikkel, like really, I don't know, just kind of hammers it home, and just the fact that he's missing too, it makes you feel bad for him. So it's like everything involves around Mikkel.
Yeah.
So Tania picked a better point in Mikkel's life, the father's suicide, because like like you said last episode, it's kind of vague. It's like Mikkel disappears in the cave. It's kind of like a weird point in time. But I
Mhm.
do think it should involve Michael and Mikkel. I think that would just kind of it would just seem to make more dark sense, you know?
Yeah, she didn't think she wondered why Adam was saying, "Go back to the day your father committed suicide," instead of the day Mikkel went missing. She felt like they should go
Mhm.
back to she should have sent Jonas back to that point.
Mhm.
So what I said
Mm.
was, I think it
Mhm.
all depends on whose perspective you are in. For Jonas, his father's suicide is where all the problems started. He later discovers that his father is Mikkel, and so the key moment to approach might change, as you say. But Jonas is also young and wants to live. If Mikkel doesn't go missing, Jonas is never born and he ceases to exist. He's not ready to make that sacrifice yet. And maybe Adam knows that. So he focuses on the moment his life went sour. And this gets
Hmm.
back to that thing of putting yourself at the center of the story. Jonas thinks, what can make this good for me instead of someone else? And as the story goes along, we discover that for
Hmm.
different characters, different moments are the key moments. But I think because we're still kind of in Jonas's POV. He's our main character. For Jonas, the key moment was the
Hmm.
father's suicide. He thought if I can stop that from happening, I won't go to France
I
and
won't. Right.
I'll stay with Marta. She won't get
Hmm.
together with Bartosz. I won't know she's I won't know I won't know all this sick stuff anymore. So that's kind of where he's just kind of he's trying to make life easy for himself, even though yes, a more compassionate person might be like, I'm gonna save Mikkel. And he honest
Hmm.
to his credit, he did try to save Mikkel, but the stranger stopped him and said, if you stop him, you're never born. So I don't think Jonas is ready to make that sacrifice yet. Now, by the end of the show, he is.
Right. Right. Okay. And yeah, the Adam that sent him back to go back to the day his father committed suicide, I think, Adam knew what he was doing at that time. He wasn't
Mhm.
exactly leading Eunice on a straight path.
Mm-mm.
Um, but I
But
mean,
Tania, like, also, I hope Tania's not listening to this actually, because that would
uh-oh.
be a spoiler for her.
Why? Oh,
But
because she's farther back in this in the
yeah, she's
show
on
right now.
episode 2.5, 2.6 right now. So I'm glad I didn't say, Tania, we're gonna talk about this on the show. So I didn't
Yeah,
say
no
that to
joke.
her, to them. So yeah, hopefully maybe they'll listen to it when they're ready to know
I
the
have an
truth.
idea. We can make like burn a CD of this, and then we could mail it to her, and we could say, "Do not open before," and then give it like a specific date that will give her enough time to watch the show. Kind
Mhm.
of like the letter got passed down in time. We can do the same thing with
Mm.
with Tania here, and
Delivered in a wooden box. Love it.
hmm with the tree of life on the cover of it. Speaking of which, hey, that segues perfectly into like my next section. Is that okay for me to move on?
Mhm. Yep.
My next section involves that wooden box and the holder of that wooden box, which would be Ines Kahnwald. So I have to give a lot of credit here to Monica Cherokee, who I didn't see them on the Discord, but they're definitely on the Reddit, and they do a lot of interesting posts. And they were the person that first got me into this Ines theory, which the theory is in the origin world, like in the world that created um, Martha and Jonas, the famous car crash. So, in the version of the world that Martha and Jonas do not stop the car crash from happening, and that car crash goes over the bridge, we know that Sonia and Merrick both die, and that the baby was never found. Presumed dead, of course, because it's a baby. It's a car crash. But the baby's body was never found. Theory is that baby was found by Daniel Kahnwald, and he adopted that baby, and that baby grew up to be Inez. So this is the way I'm going to try to fill in the loops here, because I told this to Lindsay, and Lindsay just straight out was not buying it at first. But then I think she did some research on her own, and like you might be more open to this conspiracy theory now. Is that right, Lindsay?
No, it's not. But
Oh,
I'll respond after you've shared your theory, Steve.
okay, okay. This might be a bit long-winded because there's a lot to it. Because this is dark. Okay, there's a lot of pieces here. The first piece is the family tree, the visual of the family tree. And if you want to look at this, I would suggest looking at the Eric Lutz family tree that's on the floor there. Like when Jonas dies and like the angel wings, you can see the family tree. Okay. On the Jonas's side, on his side, fourth up from the right, you can see Daniel Kahnwald. He appears just independently. He's only connected to Inez. So they just kind of pop up on that family tree out of nowhere. Daniel Kahnwald connected to Inez, who Inez is then connected to Michael, of course. Over on Eva's side of the family tree, Daniel Kahnwald is in the exact same spot, but he's not connected to anybody. He's just hanging out there by himself. In both trees, there is no mother. It's just Daniel Kahnwald and Ines Kahnwald,
Mhm.
nobody else. So that leads us to believe that Daniel adopted Ines. Because if there was a mother involved, her name would be here. So Daniel did like the single father thing. I guess that was cool back then. I don't know. But he adopted Inez. So there's right there is something that kind of connects them because Inez, single mom, adopted Mikkel. So that kind of connects Daniel and Inez in a real roundabout way. That's my first point. The second point would be the first time, and this is I think the most compelling argument is the first scene that we see Inez. She's in the hospital, and another nurse comes up and says, "Can you cover my shift for me?" And Inez is like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Um, and then she's like, "Oh, keep a secret," and she like does a little thing and like, "I'll lock in my lip," and she locks her lip. So we learn a couple things from that scene. First off, we learned that she doesn't have any family because she says so. Um, because the other lady's like, "Can you take my shift because you have no," and Inez is like, "Family?" Yeah, I know. I don't have any family. Weird. Second thing about that is right above her name tag, right here by her heart, she carries a clock right there. You can see like there's a watch there and there's a clock there right next to her heart. And so when you think about watches in the show Dark, you of course think about Tannhaus, the watchmaker, the person who may or may not be her actual grandfather. But we know that she keeps secrets as well. So I think that watch being right there and the way they show that she keeps a watch above her name tag, but no other nurse keeps a watch above her name tag the way Inez does. Then here we go. They finish that conversation. Lady's like, "Thanks, Inez. You got my shift." Inez turns and walks down the hallway. The scene shifts. And as soon as the scene shifts, it shifts. She turns into young Charlotte at that moment. You can see the scene. Like Inez is back on the hallway. Then it cuts to, in perfect succinct motion, there is Charlotte riding her bike back in 1986 through the forest. So I'll stop right there and see if because I have more points here I can make. But what do you think so far?
I mean, it's definitely an interesting theory. Yeah, I wasn't when I told you I found the theory, I wasn't necessarily saying I agreed with it, but I was saying, "Okay, I see where this came from," because my my original the reason I reacted so as I did is because the way you introduced this theory wasn't to say it was a theory. You were like, "We know that Inez was adopted by Daniel Kahnwald," and I was like, "We do? Uh, that is never said. That is not canon." Like you corrected it later, say it's your head canon. I am looking at this family tree, and I honestly can't see. I'm trying to read the name. Um, I believe I believe actually you may have the people reversed the side. Um,
Okay, okay.
because on the one side, on the left side, you were saying before you thought that Jonas's side, world 1 was the right side, which is where we have Daniel and Inez by themselves. But on the left
Mhm,
side, that is where I see Inez is connected to Mikkel Nielsen.
mhm.
Because so
But
that
not on
would
the
tell
other
me
side.
that would actually tell me that the left side is world 1.
Yes, I was incorrect there.
But I can't read the name above Ines Kahnwald.
It's Daniel Kahnwald, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I looked at it.
I'd
I
have
mean,
to
I
get a
looked at the
different,
image. I
picture,
wouldn't have wrote
but
this down if I
oh,
if
I
I
know,
didn't
I
see the
believe
image.
you. It looks like it says
Okay, okay.
Jeanette or Kenneth or somebody, which I'm like, "Who's that?" Um, but yes, I'd have to see this picture, but I think,
I,
yeah, it's an interesting theory.
I got more. I got more
Yeah,
here.
I know you do, I know you do.
Okay.
What was the first thing you said? You made the point about
The family tree, the other
okay,
nurse
the family
asking her about the
tree, which
shift, the
yeah.
clock that she keeps above her name tag, turning into Charlotte while she walks down the hallway.
Mhm,
Um, of course, the body of the baby was never discovered, so that kind of leads credence to my theory as well. That that baby could have been picked up and cared for. Um, so we got the sick mundus picture that's in the hospital,
mhm,
um, which there's no explanation for that. And who was like the first person that comes and visits Mikkel when he's in the hospital is Noah. That's like the first person that Inez called. So there's a parallel established between either the hospital and Sic Mundus or directly Inez and Sic Mundus.
mhm,
So another thing is this is just grasping at straws, but we know that her image is torn from the Kahnwald family picture, similar to how she's just kind of torn out of the story, how she's just like I said, she appears out of nowhere in this family tree, like she was torn from where she once was. I'm stretching. Sonia and Inez have a strong resemblance. The two actresses that play those two characters have a very strong resemblance. There is no like mole on Sonia's face, which is true, but they do have very similar faces. And I want to wrap this up with saying that some quotes from our heroes themselves, Yante. Yante says that they are big believers in ambivalence. They like to leave clues for their viewers to pick up. There's a lot more of this story to tell, but we don't want to fill in all those gaps. And then Barron says that our audience is smart and likes puzzles, so we like to leave puzzles for them to figure out. So
mhm,
just because they're like that, the writers of the show are like that. So that's pretty much all the evidence that I have. I think the strongest stuff was at the beginning. I should have saved that for the end because that's what you're supposed to do. Is start with your least compelling evidence and then build up to the best stuff at the end. But I don't know. It makes sense to me. It's a conspiracy theory, and there's no way to confirm it or deny it. So
mhm.
deny it if you want, listeners. I'm all ears.
Yeah, I think also because dark audiences are like they are, we do tend to look for conspiracies and
Yes.
that's and there's room to do that. So, as far as if Inez is really baby Charlotte, I think for me the main thing is the mole is not there, and it looks like, so I actually left a comment on
Okay.
Monica Cherokee's post, and I'm like, where's the mole? However, there
Okay.
is this facial thing that I mentioned. I remember I mentioned it last week and you didn't say anything
Mhm.
about it, but I guess it's because you're like, I'm sticking with my Inez theory. But I had seen a theory that the baby has a cleft lip, like the unknown. Not that saying the baby is the unknown, but that's
Mhm.
another just a tie that Tannhaus left from his world into these split worlds. The baby also has blue eyes. Now I know most people say like
Yes.
babies have
Yes.
blue eye all babies have blue eyes and they can grow into brown.
Right.
But the similarity of the actresses isn't the most compelling stuff just because like Marta also looked like Doris Tiedemann, but they're no relation.
Sure.
I think that what I've noticed is a lot of Bo and Yantia's stars look a lot alike. They seem to have a certain look. They like strong female faces. So I think a lot of their actresses actually look a lot alike, and the way they act, even some of their facial expressions, are often a lot alike. So I think they
Okay.
kind of have a certain brand. So that's not strong, but I do agree the Sic Mundus thing is compelling stuff. I just always assume that um, Noah is because he's the new priest in town that
Mhm.
the church and the hospital are somehow connected.
Mhm.
And so he's made sure to infest the entire hospital with Sigmundus paraphernalia and signs from his cult, as you
Yeah.
would if you were a member of a cult. Because I do remember that scene where Mickles holding the picture, the emerald
Mm.
tablet picture, and
Yeah.
he brought it into his hospital bed, and he thought that was really soothing for him.
I remember
So,
you mentioned how weird it
yeah.
was that it was soothing to him.
Yeah, I think it's yeah, and the watch on her chest is definitely interesting, so I'm not gonna poo-poo your theory, too bad. I don't completely buy it, but that's the fun of having a co-host.
Yeah. Good counter arguments too, like the eye color thing. Yeah, I admit that's a good argument against. The cleft lip, I didn't respond because I need to go back and look at that baby. I don't remember the baby having a cleft lip. So I can't confirm nor deny that.
Yeah.
That's if it does, that's very interesting.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, what would that even mean if the baby did have a cleft lip?
Mhm.
Like, because the baby was obviously conceived has the DNA of Sonia and, what's his name? Merrick.
Well, that baby in the origin world, but this is which we're in the origin world, but
Mhm.
again, like I said, that I have a theory that I'm gonna share later about Tannhaus's trauma and how he might have infested Adam and Eve's world with his trauma. So, if that was the case, then he just imprinted aspects from his life into each of the characters of Dark.
Right.
And so, the
The
fact that the
cleft
baby has a cleft lip, if
Okay.
that's if that's our, if that's our symbol for baby, and that was Tannhaus's most important baby, and there's this baby that a key baby that's in Marta and Jonas's world, and also Sonia and Merrick. Jonas and Marta are supposed to be parallels or could be parallels for Sonia and
Yes.
Merrick, and that's their
Sure.
child. So,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, yeah, that makes a perfect parallel, actually. If it does have a cleft lip like that, I wanna see this. I mean, I really eh so who was that baby then? Like, because the baby in Jonas's world, not the origin world, of course, turned out to be Charlotte. Well, the Charlotte, showed up on
No?
his doorstep. No, no, that's right. The DNA of that baby
Yeah,
would be Tannhaus DNA and
yeah.
Sonia DNA.
Oh, I have
So
actually, I have one more thing about Inez I wanted to mention because um, that's kind of related to this also,
okay,
is that later I'm gonna talk more about episode 1.8, the where the Tan House and the stranger have the conversation.
sure.
And when in that episode, they're cutting a lot between 1953 and between the stranger and and Tannhaus. And so there's actually a scene. This is when Ulrich goes back and he's in Tannhaus's shop and he's like, "Are you HG Tannhaus?" And he shows him the book and he's like, "What year is it?"
Mhm,
And then who comes in but Yana and
mhm,
Inez as young children. And so when I saw that, I was like, "Oh, this is interesting with Steve's theory." I kind of wanted to
mhm,
see how that interaction played out. And there was really nothing that I was like, "Okay, maybe there's a clue that could help support Steve's theory." And cuz
thank you for
cuz
looking.
Tannhaus is like, Inez, how is that's where she's telling him that these boys' bodies have been found on the construction site,
Mhm,
and he just greets them and says, "Here's your father's watch." Inez because that's what she's picking up is her father's watch that Tannhaus has fixed. And I thought they might, do something with
Mm-hmm.
their
Mm-hmm.
characters if there was a clue, and I couldn't pick anything out, but so, yeah.
I'm glad you looked though. I mean, that's I'm glad I at least got a little earworm in your brain, and you're looking for
Yeah, if I
clues
can be
for me.
convinced, I'm
Yeah,
all for a
I
good
know.
conspiracy theory.
Well, shoot, yeah. Where do you want to lead to next here? Do you want to stick with Tannhaus and Inez? Do you want to move on to a different member of the Wyndon crew?
I think you were gonna talk next about Marta?
Sure, that involves me doing like a lot of talking. If you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure. So what was your goal in doing, like, what were you looking for with the Marta timeline?
To try to figure out at which point Martha's diverged,
Mm,
because we're talking about basically three different Marthas and two different Jonases here.
mhm,
And these are all World 2 Martha. Forget that World 1. We don't like her anymore. We only want World 2 Martha with the bangs.
mhm,
So the best way I could figure out how to like differentiate between these two Marthas is we have World 2 Martha, we have World 2A Martha, and then we have Alt Martha. Alt Martha is who becomes Eva. Martha 2A is the one that's killed by Adam.
mm,
And there's also two Jonases. There's Jonas A and Jonas B. Those are a little easier to like figure out.
mhm,
But I think the best place to start is when um Martha, let's see, where did I start at in my list here? When Martha 2 meets Jonas A for the first time. When Martha World 2 meets that first Jonas that travels back. Because remember, this Jonas was saved by Alt Martha,
mhm,
and then Alt Martha took him to World 2 and then bailed on him.
mhm.
So then
Yep.
he went and met Martha, who I'm calling Martha 2, not
Mhm.
Alt Martha, who just bailed him. This is just World 2 Martha.
Yeah.
So they hook up together. They travel to the future. They meet Stranger Martha in like when they meet in the desert world or whatever after the apocalypse. So he shows Martha 2 the future. Then at that point, they go to Eva's. There, Jonas A is killed by Alt Martha. Alt Martha comes out of the shadows. Martha 2 is here, and they watch Jonas get killed. So then at that point, Martha 2 goes on a mission to go save Jonas. This is where she diverges. She becomes Martha 2A and Alt Martha. Because let's say she becomes Alt Martha. That's when she actually does not save Jonas. Alt Martha is the Martha that is whisked away by Bartosh, right?
Mhm.
The Martha did not save Jonas. So she travels back with Bartosh. She gets a scar. She meets the unknown. She gets hugged. She eventually, no, I'm sorry. She doesn't meet the unknown and get hugged. She gets that scar. She kills Jonas A, and then she ultimately becomes Eva. Meanwhile, Jonas does get saved by Martha 2A, this other Martha. She is the one that gets sent back to 1899 by Adam, meets stranger Jonas. She's the one that gives the dark matter to stranger Jonas. Then she goes back to Adam, and Adam kills her because he's like, Martha, you're the origin. She's the one that gets pregnant and gets killed. So
Mm.
that's how these two are differentiated. Did that make sense?
Yeah. They're both pregnant. Like, both
Correct. Yes,
Alt Marta
correct.
and Marta
I
2A
forgot
are
about
both
that.
pregnant.
They both get it. That's right, because they don't diverge until like afterwards.
Mhm.
And when they become two Marthas afterwards, and then two embryos, I suppose. They split up too. And yeah, those 2 Jonases also, like, have different fates too. Like, the Jonas A, who's saved by Alt Martha, he's ultimately killed by Alt Martha. The other Jonas, Jonas B, the one that survives the apocalypse and works with Claudia, becomes Stranger Jonas, um, saves Magnus and Bartosz and Francisca and all them. He eventually kills Hannah and becomes Adam.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I think that's it. That's all my notes on that. That was a lot quicker than I thought it was going to be. I thought it'd be more complicated, but that's that. Do you have any questions? Probably 5.
No, I don't have any questions because I did do this myself a few episodes ago because I was so confused about just
Oh, in
trying
the
to track.
podcast?
No, just like
Oh.
to understand the show myself.
Mhm.
I was trying to see how they were all connected. And what was interesting was the the Marta and the Jonas that died. The sweet thing about the dead ones is they didn't become the evil people. They
That's
died
right.
sort of innocent and kind and loving each other.
That's right.
But then once that version died, they needed to deal with whatever version the other, like Jonas would keep interacting with whatever version of Marta he was given, and the same for Marta. There's this, you might think they say, "Oh, it's a perfect match, never believe anything else." Well, which version are you talking about? Well, they all are.
Hmm.
If one
Ah, okay.
Because otherwise you'd say only the non-bang Martha will survive or suffice, like the Martha bangs, not bang. that
Hey, that was your slip, not mine.
that you might be like, okay, well, they're no longer, he was only soulmates with that Marta. But that's not true because whichever Marta he was given, we have to remember, like, the Marta that he ended up working with is the Marta that most actually related to him because she could relate to the struggle of trying to save the world and trying to save her family members. Whereas the other Marta never had to deal with that. The most stress she had to deal with was she wanted to make out with Jonas again, so her suffering wasn't really relating to Jonas's, but the newer Martha, the other versions of Marta could. So they became his perfect match. And then at the end we have almost another version of Marta, although she's tied in there with all of
Mhm, mhm.
all of your versions as well. And I know Marta herself kept feeling slighted because Jonas seemed to only want that one Marta. And she would be like, "Why can't you pick me?" Um, except at the end, and he finally says, "We are a perfect match. Never believe anything else." And they're both on the same page. So that's really nice. But it'd be easy to get stuck on. Well, oh, we only need this Marta. We only want this Jonas. But those were the innocent versions, and those innocent versions terminated, and these other ones were there. They were the ones that existed in that space.
I'm stuck back on thinking about soulmates now. When you said, like, like we're perfect for each other and like any version of either one, that got my head thinking about the fact that even though we have like, 5 Marthas and 4 Jonases, they're all stemmed to like from the same person, whether we're talking world 1 or world 2.
Mm.
So like wouldn't theoretically it be like the same soul, like the same like inner person in each of these people? Like no
That's
matter which Jonas you look at, it's going to be the same soul.
Yeah, that's true. The only thing where that gets sticky is that in a way there there aren't really two Jonases. because there's only one world 1 Jonas. There is no world 2 Jonas, and there is a world 1
Okay,
and a world 2
yes.
Marta. So, I
Correct.
guess I almost think of them as separate.
Mm,
However, where it gets tricky is gonna come with the Stargate scene and which
that's
version of
right.
Marta did Jonas really first fall in love with. But
Yeah, and do
let's leave
Jonas and Martha
that
even
for
get do they even get souls? Like, do they even because they don't exist, like, in, like, if the origin world is for real, that means that Jonas and Martha and, like, this whole litany of people, like, no longer exist at all.
Mhm.
So, did they ever have a soul? I would like to think yes, in some sense, but it's just an interesting
Mm.
concept, I suppose.
Well, speaking of interesting concepts, let's talk about
Yeah.
Agnes.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Agnes, I remember, she came to the door and Egon Tiedemann was there and they were having a little brief conversation and Egon asked her who her grandmother was. She was getting ready to answer or maybe getting ready to like divert the question
Yeah.
when they got interrupted somehow. So
Mhm.
that question was never answered. Like, you know, she never answered his question. But we know what the answer is because Agnes's parents are her tree is pretty easy to point out here. We know who her parents are.
Mhm. Yeah, I just wanted to touch base with that because
Yeah.
of the fact that it's one of those mysteries like Woller's Eye, except you
Mhm.
can
Mhm.
actually figure this one out.
Yeah, that's right. It's like her parents obviously are Bartosz and Silja, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that would mean her grandparents, I'll say the grandparents on Silja's side, which is the interesting one, I
Mhm.
think. Her grandparents would be Egon Tiedemann and Hannah.
Yeah.
So Hannah would be her grandmother
Yeah.
on one side anyway, but she has another grandma too. Everybody has 2 grandmas theoretically.
Yeah, our other grandmother is Regina.
Everybody loves Regina. So
And
who do you think she
Alexander,
would have
but
answered? Do you think she knew, like, about her own lineage at that time, and she knew the answer to the question, but was just dodging it?
I don't know. I'm assuming she does know who it is, but
Yeah.
it was just funny when you go back and go, "Egon, you're her grandfather." You
Yes.
don't you're asking the question that and, like,
Like,
how would she possibly
who was that woman that I that I courted with that night? Do you know what her name is?
Yeah, it was just a fun little dark mystery. It's no
It's an
longer a
easy one.
mystery. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an easy one. I know, like, there was lots of lingering questions that you had in your recaps, and that must have been one of them, and so we got the answer finally. We wouldn't have known the answer though until what? Episode 7 of season 3. That's when we finally figure that timeline out.
Yeah, they really save a lot of stuff for season 3, and I guess that makes sense that they would
Yeah.
do that, but a lot of the biggest and most interesting reveals are saved for that very end, so yeah, you have to wait a while, that which is the frustrating thing is because that episode was, one it was 1.8 apparently, I didn't realize that, but
Mhm.
today looking at that episode again, I'm like, it was that long ago, by the time you finish the show, you're probably not gonna
Mhm.
remember that fact unless you do a dark rewatch and sit there and pore over everything and go, "Oh, yeah, here, this is what that means." So,
And that's our people. Yes.
yeah. So the same thing with this, I mapped out this Jonas family tree that
Mhm.
was interesting, and that popped up some stuff that I didn't realize. Some of it I did, but then some of the connections that I
Yeah, what you
found.
got?
Well, because we everybody knows that Ulrich is Jonas's grandfather because his
Mhm.
father is Michael. He also has a grandfather that we never get to meet, which is Hannah's father. That seems nice. He does laundry. While he
Oh,
walks
yeah,
around town.
he looks like a hippie, that's right, I forgot about that
Yeah.
guy.
Um, but his grandfather is Ulrich, and his grandmother is Katerina. But also,
Mhm.
Ulrich is also his great grandson.
His great-grandson?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, you're okay, yes. Yeah, I think you skipped a generation there, right?
Yeah. Well, yes, I'm going to have to. It's really easier to put a maybe Steve can put a link to this family tree and the recap in the thing. But look at it when you get a chance because it's really interesting. Because we have Ulrich's father is of course Trant,
Mhm.
and then Trant is also his grandson because Jonas and Martha got together, had the unknown. The
Right.
unknown got together with Agnes,
Mhm.
and they had Trant, and then Trant and Yana had Ulrich. So it's almost like there was this whole statement about the labyrinth, and you have to get to the center. And that's how I
And
feel about
this
this family tree. Is
they
that
say, like, in the center, like, you find yourself too.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And then Silja is both his half sister and his great 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 grandmother because she's Agnes's mother. So it hurts your head to think about it, and he's actually related also distantly to Bartosz
Of
and
course.
Regina and and Alexander, who's actually Boris Newald, and then Claudia and Bernd are up there at the tippy top, and then above Claudia is Egon and Doris. So the
I need you to
only
back me up a second. You
mhm.
said, um, how did Alexander get in there? Oh, because of Bartosz. Of course.
Yeah,
Of
because
course.
yeah, Trant's
Wow.
parents are the unknown and Agnes. Agnes's
Yes.
parents are Bartosz and Silja, and then, Bartosz's parents are Boris and Regina. And then Regina's parents are Claudia and Bernd. And then Claudia's
They're all
parents are Egon, and so Egon's actually on there twice as well, although he's only connected really through Silja, um, and Silja being Jonas' half sister.
right.
So he's only on there. He's not really a genetic relation that direction. It's just that he's her parent.
Oh, he's
But
like the only one that was left out.
the only people that aren't that I really don't that I couldn't find a connection to would be Peter's family
Right.
and Helge and that lot. But everybody else seems to be related to now Jonas. Now Francisca gets brought in through Magnus, but they never have any kids.
Right,
So,
right, right, right. If they
um
did, though, that would completely, like, tie the knot among all the characters. They would all be family at that point if, Magnus and Friska did, like, have a
mhm.
baby together.
They actually and I didn't plot this out. I would one maybe that'll be my next dark project, who knows? Maybe I'll make everybody's family tree. But apparently Magnus and Francisca are related somehow. They're like cousins, and I can't
Didn't you just
remember
establish that
exactly.
the Peter family is not related to
To Jonas.
Oh, but to Magnus, because Magnus and Jonas are related.
Yeah, I'd have to
So they would be, like, twice
somebody
removed they would be, like, a
somebody
twice removed.
mentioned Well, I think there's also Noah. Also, don't forget that Noah's in that family as well.
The Peter family. I mean, the Dopplers, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and, like, the reason Burned is existing, because you could be like, "Oh, well, through Burned, wouldn't Helge and Peter be connected?" But Helge's not the natural child of Burned, so he's off in his own little country. But,
Kinda like
yeah,
Daniel Kahnwald.
I did not research Magus and Francisca, but I know I saw in a previous Reddit or something that they showed how they were related, and it was kind of horrifying. They were like, "All the couples are basically related
I need to
somehow
look
or
into
another."
that for my own good. I need to look into that. So, I don't know if we'll talk about that on a podcast, but I gotta check that out. So, I
Yeah,
will.
it's fascinating stuff if you really wanna get into it.
Now, a couple things I wanted to bring up was something from the very first episode and something from the very last episode.
Okay.
I want to go back to the very first episode because we wanted to talk a little bit about some foreshadowing,
Mhm.
and a big part of that is with Mickle, of course, his
Mhm.
magic trick. What do you have to tell us about that Mickle magic trick, the yellow and the blue cup thing that he did, or were the yellow and the blue the balls that
No,
that
there's
disappeared?
he does a magic trick and there's a pawn, and we
That's
did a
it. Yeah.
quiz. I gave Steve a quiz in the first after the first season of Dark, and I quizzed him on certain things I wanted him to remember because I was like, "Oh, this will be cool if he, remembers this magic trick exactly." But Bo and Yantia actually have a video, which I didn't know existed, but they talk about this where he has the yellow cup and the blue cup. The pawn moves from the yellow cup, which is the present, 2019, the high school, the power plant,
Mhm.
to the blue cup, 1986, the blue wallpaper room. So that's just a
Right,
visual
right.
cue that the director and the writer put into that scene, so you would see, like, this foreshadowing that there was gonna be time travel from yellow to blue.
That's so wild, and it's a pawn. Poor little Mickle's just a pawn in all this, and that makes a lot of sense too.
And he's also Mickles wearing that, the skeleton outfit, and then he's gonna, Michael dies. So it's just they put 2 visual cues in that scene to tell you more about that character that you won't have confirmed until later on in the show.
Yeah, but I mean, I definitely would not have caught that on my own whatsoever. Like like the yellow cup going to the blue cup, 2019 going to 86. That's warms my heart. I like it a lot. It's neat. But yeah, what about that last scene? Like that's what something else we wanted to go into as well from that's the first episode. The last episode, of course, is when they see the bridge. What kind of bridge is it? The Dunning Bridge? I can't remember the exact name of the bridge, but when they get to go in that outside of time, when they're in their Stargate, that's what we call it, the Stargate. But I know the technical word for it is Kruger's Bridge, Dunning's Bridge. I don't know. I can see Lindsay typing furiously.
I'm
She's gonna
not
have it
typing
for us.
anything. I thought it was
Oh,
the Einstein Rosen Bridge.
oh, okay. Well, yeah. So Lindsay didn't even have to look it up. She looked in her brain and she got it. The Einstein
Freddy
Rosen
Krueger's
Bridge.
bridge. Yep, here we go. Krueger's bridge.
That makes sense too. It's the bridge to the dream world. That's that's
Well,
kind of like what. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, I think to start with this, I wanted to talk about episode 1.8, because that's sort of
Oh,
foreshadowing towards what happens here, and
yeah.
that'll
Okay.
it'll move nicely into that.
Gotcha.
So, as part of 1.8, scene episode 1.8, Tannhaus tells the stranger that it is his fate to be in the clock shop. that he
Right.
used to want more. He used to want to travel through time,
Mhm.
but he knows that he's meant to be in this shop here and now to be with Charlotte. He doesn't say that, but he says that later to Charlotte.
Yeah, he implies it, yeah.
So one could theorize that this Tannhaus in World 1 is playing a role given him by his true maker, the real Tannhaus in the origin world. He was slated to play a
Okay.
part the day that the two worlds were created. It could also be Origin Tannhaus projecting onto his World 1 conduit that he needs to treasure the person that he is caretaker for more than anything else, because the original Tannhaus did not do that, didn't take care of his family, and he lost them. So this
Right.
Tannhaus is like, no, I need to take care of Charlotte. This is where I'm meant to be, and all that.
Stability, yes. Right.
Yeah. I also noticed that in that in that episode, sorry, the clocks all say 11:05.
Hmm. Okay.
The very first time that stranger Jonas walks into the shop, it says 11:05, and then later on, after the episode is halfway through, they show the clocks again, and it is still 11:05 after they've been sitting there talking.
So, wait, are you trying to say that it's possible that they were, like, in the, Einstein Rosen Bridge during that conversation as well?
That's what I'm thinking now, that like
Wow.
time seems to have stopped still in Tannhaus's clock shop. Because
So you're saying he always exists kind of outside of time.
right, because and this actually wasn't thinking this contributing, but I was like, now I see this could even be further proof, because I was like, oh, let me go now to the last episode when we meet Merrick and Sonia and see what time the clocks say then. Because originally I thought they said 11:05
Okay.
because that's when the accident happens. That's what I thought, maybe that the clocks were frozen on 11:05 because that's when his child died,
Okay.
and that he had
That
chosen
makes
to stop the
sense.
clocks or something. That's where my brain
Yeah.
originally went. But when we went
Sure.
to that episode, the very final episode, the clocks all say a different time. One of them says 11:05, but the other ones say anything from 3:45
Wow.
to 6:30. So every clock says a different time. And
Okay.
so
I'm
that
with you.
makes me think, now I'm
Mhm.
thinking this is even further proof that the fact that the clocks all said 11:05 in episode 1.8 means that this shop is frozen in time. And I don't have
I see.
any proof of that other than, why are these clocks all say this and later on they all say different times?
That makes a lot of sense because it's like the possibilities are endless. It could be 11:05. If another world, if something else were to happen, the trajectory were to change, it would be, 2:15 in another world, and then he would be stuck at that time. Or maybe if the trajectory went a different way, it would be like, 12:12 in another world, and he would be stuck there. That makes a ton of sense because I'm thinking back to when we've talked about Tannhaus, and we're like, we're not really exactly sure like what year this is that they're talking. And like sometimes it's really not clear. And there's no
Mhm.
like real clear indicator because we see
Yeah.
Stranger Jonas who time travels, and then we see Tannhaus who just you can't tell how old he is ever. So
Mhm.
um I'm loving this. I'm believing this that that the trajectory that they went to, have that accident and to create these different worlds, he got stuck in the 11:05 time frame.
Yeah,
Now, how would
I
that
don't know what to make of it. This wasn't even what I was looking for. I was wanting to study
Yeah.
the dialogue of that episode and see, like, how they foreshadowed the finale, which they do, and I have some material for that I'll share. But I just wanted to mention this other point first, because I'm like, okay, what's going on with the clocks? And I didn't have time to go see when he has the conversation with Charlotte, for instance, does it show a clock? And when they show in
Oh
episode the
boy.
between the time episode, I know they show his shop. So like what time did the clock say then? So it might be that I'm jumping the gun here, but I just thought that was interesting that all the clocks said 11:05 and then later in the episode they still say 11:05. So I'm just like,
That's so interesting. I
yeah.
can't wait to see this for myself.
And like you
But
said,
yeah,
they
what
they like puzzles, so it's not an accident that they did
yes.
that. So then continuing on,
Mhm.
yeah, the what I was looking for was how did their conversation could it have maybe foreshadowed the finale? So they talk about the Einstein Rosen Bridge, which is a passage between the black hole and the white hole, and it connects time and space. And then later they say our thinking is shaped by dualism, entrance, exit, black, white, good, evil, but that's wrong. And then he says, have you ever heard of the triquetra? And this is where they're talking
S
about nothing is complete with without a third dimension. And this is the same speech Claudia used in the finale when she's talking to Adam, and he says, the triquetra.
So he's probably remembering that exact moment in his life when he was
Mhm,
Stranger Jonas talking to Tannhaus, and that was an important conversation, and he forgot and
mhm.
forgot all about it.
Right, and in between, interestingly enough, when they're in between this conversation, we cut to scenes between Ulrich and Helge. And I found that interesting because they cut to Ulrich and Helge in the finale episode. They show them in the parallel worlds. And I
What are they
was like,
doing in episode 1.8? What is Helge and, Ulrich
well, this is
what
when
exactly are
this
they
is when
doing?
Ulrich goes back to 1953 and kills or tries to kill little Helge to stop time. And so the note I wrote down is we have Ulrich and we have Helge. Ulrich, a father who loses his son, and Helge, a son who wanders away from home because he's not appreciated by a parent who is harsh and unyielding. Now, Tannhaus isn't harsh and unyielding; he's more stoic and and a little
Mhm.
bit forgetful. But also, old Helge dies when his younger self kills him in a car crash. So I was thinking
Right.
Ulrich and Helge very much coincide with Tannhaus and Merrick.
Sure do, and didn't you say those car crashes happened at the exact same spot too?
Yeah, and I'm also curious. One thing again, I didn't have time to look into everything, but I wondered the car. Helge is driving a station wagon, and I was trying to remember what
Mhm.
kind of car Merrick was driving when they get into the car crash in the last episode.
I mean,
But
of course, I wanna say station wagon because that's, like, what my brain is, like, telling me to say, but it probably is not, but it'd be great
yeah,
if it was. It's like you're it's like doing suggestion to my mind, and, like, my mind is, like, visualizing Merrick and Sonia in a station wagon now. It
yeah, we want it to be a station wagon really badly, but
Yes, that's right.
and then in the speech, they talk about the stranger and Tannhaus, then talk about a wormhole connects 3 dimensions. They show Ulrich in the cave, and then Tannhaus says there's more than 2 dimensions. There's more than 2 passages. They show the passage, and they show the place where the third world opens up in the last episode. So again, they're
Wow.
foreshadowing that.
And
They
a
then
really interesting Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was
Sorry.
just gonna say, like, I know that, like, when they were writing this show, when they wrote season 1 because when I went to read some of the stuff about Inez, like, they said that they didn't have the ending 100% mapped out. They had some things that could kinda go either way with their story.
Hmm.
But with this, it looks like a clear indicator that they that this 1.8 episode, they definitely had the ending in mind. because it seems like it's so clear cut. Everything that you're saying definitely matches up with what happens in the last episode, in the bridge that they're on, and the three worlds, and it seems to me like they had that scene in mind when they began this project.
You would think you would think they did. I mean, it shows so much thought and so much detail. But then Tannhaus talks about, imagine you are standing in an infinitely large dark room, shining a light to
Oh
your
my god.
left. Yes.
Yeah, please go on. I love this.
The wormhole, inside the wormhole, it's bent and the light comes from behind. And I'm just like, okay,
Mhm.
Marta and Jonas are in an infinitely large dark room
Mhm.
in that Stargate scene. They both back up into each other, so there's kind of the mention of light coming from behind, and
Right.
they find the passage to the third world by backing up, and they see the light,
Yes.
then it kind of opens up. So it's not an exact match, but I'm just saying there's a lot of stuff
Oh,
that
it's a
lines
match.
up, and
Well, you were saying, like, the thing about, like, the empty room and, like, the light, I was like, I'm just picturing in my head exactly what we saw in the last episode.
and he has the paper and he shows the
Mhm.
light being bent and pokes the pencil through, and there's a guy, and it's just the fact that, and also he's saying it to stranger Jonas and saying, imagine you were standing in an infinitely large dark room, and then of course that's exactly what Jonas does. So yeah, it's just bizarre.
And I'm guilty. I'm guilty, Lindsay, of, like, you go back and listen to our recaps. I'm thinking about it now, like, all the times I've been like, "Oh, they're talking again. Ugh." They're going off on their dumb rants about whatever, and
Mhm.
those dumb rants are like what, ties everything together, and what they're not just put there randomly. I mean, sometimes it seems like they really, like, hammer, like, the same concept over your head, like, a million times,
Mhm.
and it's like, "Yeah, I get it. Just because you have a different character telling me this, yeah, I'm with you now."
Mhm.
But, I mean, I remember this scene, and I remember, like, thinking, like, "Geez, I mean, this stuff is interesting, I guess, but, I mean, I like it." But I think we were both saying, like, how boring it was. And it was a
Yeah.
masterpiece in the making.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing you don't see it's brilliant until later. But
Mhm.
so then talking a little bit more about the wormhole Stargate scene and what it might mean.
Mm.
So Adam, and this is something you asked last week. You were like, "Yeah, I don't get this scene." And then you said, "What I tried to explain made you more confused," and I felt bad. So I looked at some theories on
Okay,
Reddit and was trying to help myself and you be able to talk about this a little more. So,
okay.
taking this from a user on Reddit called Gearon, he says Adam tells Jonas that he won't be able to find the origin world unless they go together, being Jonas and Marta. This scene
Mhm.
shows why. Jonas has to appear before the child Marta, possibly in infinite realities, and Marta has to similarly appear before the child Jonas. This is planting the seed for them to feel deja vu towards each other and to get attracted. Without this attraction,
Hmm.
the rest of the series wouldn't work. Notice how they
Oh.
only see the way to the third world after they both make their appearances to their child counterparts. This is because both of them have fulfilled their obligation to plant the seed for their relationships. They can't close the loop in their own world until they have done so. You might ask, okay, but what about cause and effect? If you're currently in the forked timeline, isn't whatever they do irrelevant to the original timeline? The answer is that the tunnel represents existing outside of time itself, so it's not bound by cause effect relationship. They aren't in any particular reality. I believe they're interacting with all realities simultaneously. They both plant the seed that sparks their relationship, and then they are allowed to leave. In a way, this is also a paradox. The eventual destruction of their worlds was the seed for their loops. The end is the beginning.
Okay. All right. Yeah, the first like half of that,
Yes.
I really latched on to. I kind of started again. I kind of started getting lost towards the end,
Mhm.
but at the beginning there, that makes a lot of sense. Like that explains why World Two Martha feels like she knows Jonas because it was like it's like a core memory that she had as a kid.
Mhm.
Kinda like I have my core memories that, like, kinda defined me, and so them glimpsing each other, yeah, kinda like instills that core memory in each other so they will always be drawn to each other. Um, I think I just maybe I did like a too long didn't read right there for you. But,
Mhm.
um, yeah, that makes a lot more sense to me now because it just yeah, like I said before, it was adorable, but I didn't really get it. Um, I think I'm getting it now. I'm glad you brought it back up because that makes a lot more sense to me now.
I think the Stargate scene and how you feel about that and what you think why you think that's important is directly related to how you feel about loop versus one time,
Oh,
because
yeah?
I that's why I think the second part of that speech that I read, that comment, is not quite resonating with you, because I believe this person is saying that they think this is a different time. But there are other people that this other person says that actually the Stargate scene means something a little bit different. That yes, it means that they had to be attracted to each other for this to work. However, um, they're also looping in here that why Claudia says that it's the first time they're having this conversation. And this is by Michael Scott. This user is this next comment I'm going to read. But yes, I agree with
Okay.
you. The first comment, I liked how the importance is that they've always done this, that they always saw each other as kids. So it's not a
Mhm.
one-time thing. So he says, by taking advantage of the moment when time stops, Claudia creates her own parallel reality. She has a conversation with Adam and says that it is happening for the first time. And we can't really blame her for thinking so, because from her perspective, that's true.
Mhm. That's right.
But remember, this conversation with Adam is both happening and not happening. In her new reality, she enlightens Adam on how Jonas and Alt Marta can finally untie the knot. But in her other reality, she never has this conversation at all. We don't get to see the end of this other reality, but Eva tells us that Adam kills her and her body is found by her younger self. From
Right.
here, we can presume the rest of the events of the loop take their course and loop on as usual. What we do see, however, is Claudia's new parallel reality play out. Adam teaches Jonas about the loophole, Jonas saves Alt Marta, and they travel to the origin world. Just like when Alt Marta saved Jonas and didn't save Jonas, Claudia had her conversation with Adam, and she didn't have her conversation with Adam. Once again, both of these things happen, and from a perspective of nonlinear time, have always happened. There is now a reality where the loop cycles on as usual, and there is a reality where the loop leads to an exit point for Jonas and Alt Marta. And both of these realities exist simultaneously. And this is why I joined
Hmm.
Team One Time, because of this one little paragraph. Because I was
Wow.
like, that makes a lot of sense. And that leads into Schrodinger's cat, but I wanna go ahead and give you a chance to respond.
Okay. I think one of the problems that I've noticed or one of the things that we keep talking about when we talk about the loop is people refer to it as a time loop, and I think that's the wrong terminology. I think it's more of a loop of causality, where like you go to a previous time and you cause something to happen, and that, you know, will create a loop which doesn't continue. There's no definite like stop or start of any time that we can measure in anybody's life. I mean, you can say birth, death, sure. But I mean, we have like a whole world here full of like, billions of souls. So there's really, no like, let me read what I wrote here. That'll might help me.
Mhm.
And this, I really liked when you said from Claudia's perspective, that's the first time it happened to her. Because I think that the illusion of a loop only exists from the perspective of the travelers who are seeing the events repeated. Those are the only people that are noticing there's any sort of loop happening. Nobody else is it happening to. And it only is happening to people who travel back in time, of course, because they're going to have two different perspectives of a situation, especially when they meet one another. They both have their own perspective of it. So those two things will definitely happen because they're there, they're happening. But it's not like they're going to keep happening over and over again. It just happens once. It's like a linear line, and it's lived from perspective to perspective. Like I have my perspective of where this podcast began, and you have your perspective of where this podcast began. Um, of course, we're not traveling in time, though. Does that? I don't know. That makes sense to me. Did I clarify myself? Okay. No.
It makes sense. I think it's just super hard to grasp onto because we do have characters like with Charlotte and Elizabeth, for instance. We have Charlotte being born, then Elizabeth being born, and then Charlotte being born. So it's just since we don't know also which one happened, it's kind of like chicken and egg. How do you
Sure.
plot these
Sure.
things? How do you plot these things out?
Exactly.
And how do you understand them? But I guess the part I like about this theory is it makes sense to me that we have this idea of Schrodinger's cat and that it depends on the person seeing it. The person has to open the box to see what the
Oh,
fate is.
that again. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess that the thing is we are watching this show. So in a way, we're the person watching the Schrodinger's cat experiment when we're watching the show. Because we're watching it, this thing happens with this loophole. And Claudia has the conversation. They go into the origin world and they fix it. And that it's in a way dependent on us as the viewer to see that for that to become a reality
Hmm.
that existed kind of outside of the loop because we're seeing it. And that theory is in a way supported by the fact that Marta and Jonas, when they are about ready to go into that third world, they look out at the audience as if we're there and they're seeing us and they're like, "Oh, you see me, we see you. Okay, we can proceed." And it's
Wow.
like without us as viewers watching this
They don't
extra
exist.
time, it wouldn't happen. So we helped
That's why.
save Wyndon.
Yeah, and we're continuing to. We're making people. We're getting people involved. People like Nate and my sister who have never seen it. They're helping out Wyndon. I think it's neat. The show is almost like a Rorschach test, is because when you that's something else I wanted to go back on too. When you were talking about the Stargate, and you were like, people see different things in the Stargate. It's
Mhm.
like, sure, we all have our different theories, and it's kind of like, what is your theory about the Stargate? Because it depends on like what your perspective is of how you feel about that Stargate. Um, So yeah, I think it's kind of a neat Rorschach test. You could look at that from any perspective of this show, and like it kind of says something about you, um, the viewer, as to like what kind of conclusions you draw. Like I'm still stuck on like this is just one linear thing happening, and in my mind, the proof of that is with Adam and Eva when they meet, and Adam does the trick where he doesn't have the bullets in the gun. And
Mhm.
Eva's like, "You're supposed to kill me. This is new. This is all new stuff now."
Mhm.
Um, which is true because she knows that she dies at that point, not because she's experienced death. She doesn't remember Adam walking in this room at this time at any point in time. She just knows that she dies because she walks in on her body. And she knows that Adam is the one that kills her. She just knows that from when she was a child and she experienced finding her body. So that's how she knows. It's not because she remembers, it's because she experienced it from her own perspective as a younger person. It makes sense to me.
Yeah. No, I think the reason it might not make sense or not convince somebody is
Okay.
because you don't say it, it'd be one thing if she said, "That isn't how it happened." But she says, "That's what happens every time." So it's not, she alludes to that by saying that there's more than one time. The fact that she adds that in, I think, is where people would have a sticking point. It's not like she's just
Okay.
saying, "That's not what happened that one time last year," or like, so many years ago. She says specifically every time, and plus there's, like, people like Claudia that keep saying, "And it happens over and over again in my world and in your
Right.
world."
You
And
see, that's why, like, I feel like I'm the one that has to be convinced otherwise because I'm a strict believer in this linear line, and like the show itself and the characters themselves are telling me it's a loop. In this
mhm,
other book that I love, that's a time travel book called Rant by Chuck Palahniuk. It deals in time travel. And in
mhm,
that book, too, everything's a loop that just keeps happening over and over and over again. And people remember their past lives. And it's like, I, as a reader, am like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like like, I like this book a lot. I think it's wonderful, but I don't agree with what you're saying about this loop happening over and over again. And here's Dark doing it, and they're telling me, they're saying, "This is a
mhm,
loop, Steve." And I'm like, "I don't think so." Maybe I'm
mhm,
stubborn, I don't know.
mhm.
That's just that's what my Rorschach test tells me.
Yeah. Well, we think about the image of Tannhaus with the piece of paper. He takes the piece of paper and he bends it and he says,
Yes.
"Here it is." Now,
Yes.
whether if you're traveling on that piece of paper, you could go through, you could touch everything on that paper one time, or you could do a loop de loop and do it over and over again. Like, you ride the roller coaster one time, you ride the roller coaster multiple times. Unless those realities are all distinct and different, then it really still becomes one time because it's a repeat. So that's why I told you I feel like I'm kind of agnostic about this issue, because it's kind of like when people say, "Well, what do you think the end of the world is really gonna be like?" I'm comparing
Mhm.
this to, like, as a Christian, people will say, like, "Well, what do you think
Sure.
that the end of days is gonna be like? Or what will things
Mhm.
like be in heaven?" And I'm kinda, at the end of the day, I kind of say, like, "I don't know." And so it's like and nobody really knows if it's one time or a loop, but you can find support for both positions in the show, and that's kind of interesting to talk about, that they left, like you said, they like ambivalence. So, probably
Mhm.
Bo and Yonta put this in here on purpose to be something
Mhm.
people could people could discuss, and that everybody, we would all be puzzling over their show for decades and hundreds of years from now.
It's working so far. I mean, That's some refreshing stuff to hear you say. Because yeah, I've dabbled in Christianity myself, and I had like really interesting feelings. Like I was baptized as an adult, and I just had like like you, I've never been exactly sure. There's never been like no like positive assurances. Like I'm absolutely sure that this God exists, and this is what the path is, and this is what happens after we die. I've never been sure. I don't see how anybody could be positive about it. But at that time, I was younger then, maybe like 20 years younger than I am now, and I was plagued with this idea that everybody else who was in the church that was a Christian was in on it. They knew, like they were positive of what their faith was, and like they were just sure of it, and they just acted the part, and I was just convinced. It took me, like, getting to know these people to realize that I was wrong about that, that, like, I was projecting that on them, that, like, "Oh, so, like, to be a Christian means that you absolutely have to believe this, and if you don't believe it, then you're not allowed to call yourself a Christian." I realize now that's nonsense, but for at one point, I
Mhm.
did believe that, so I was kinda questioning, like, am I a Christian? Like, I don't know, and I still don't know to this day. And I feel refreshed to know that like not just you, I mean you today just now helped refresh me, which I like, but people through my life that I've met that I've thought like were just the strictest Muslim or the strictest, Jewish person that was, upright and had 100% faith. Then you start talking to them and you realize that, they have their doubts and they question things and they feel sure one week and they feel not so sure the next week. And that's
Mhm.
just how it goes. Tangent for you,
Yeah.
Lindsay.
There has to be room for doubt in there, otherwise faith doesn't mean much. You have to it's never it's never a one and done and you understand everything exactly right. You're always remaking yourself that way. But
Sure.
let's get back to dark. I wanted to approach the Stargate scene from a slightly different angle. One of
Okay.
the one of the things I was talking to you about was the people in the Stargate. Remember how I mentioned that Mikkel and Michael are in there and Katerina. So
Hmm.
I wanted to just read this a commentary on that scene that I got. It's from the review that I read to you, Steve, from, the other recap that I sent to you, and I can't remember who the person was, but you mentioned it was very cynical, but I found this
Oh, I
part
remember
not
this. Yeah.
cynical, and I really
Okay.
liked it. So, she or the writer says, "I've previously discussed chosen ones and the various soul connections between characters over time. In the season 2 episode where Marta and Jonas have sex for the first time, Katerina and Mikkel are lying in bed together in the next room while Ulrich and Hannah have sex downstairs. Is this ringing a bell to you? It's from also this,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
So it's from the favorite episode again, the one where Jonas goes back and stops his father. So Marta
Yeah.
and Jonas having sex for the first time, Katerina and Mikkel lying in
Yeah.
bed together, Ulrich and Hannah have sex downstairs. I suggested then that we were being shown the true soulmate bonds. It
Right.
appears they are a soulmate cluster with Ulrich and Hannah on the periphery. Though Hannah isn't on the bridge, she gets the last visual and last word of the season. She is still the all mother goddess of this universe, and her son won't be denied his place in it. Zeus / Ulrich is represented in the final scene by the lightning and thunderstorm. Just what does he want
Hmm.
Torben to continue hiding from the others? Katerina, Mikkel, Jonas, Marta, and the Unknown are all present in the Time Bridge. This they call it the Time Bridge, it's not the Stargate. Marta is pregnant with the Unknown. Katerina and Unknown are each only represented once. They are the next closest bonds to Jonas and Martha after Mikkel, which is comforting in the case of the unknown, given the way those relationships appear in the material world. All 5 characters sacrifice their lives for others. Katerina dies for Ulrich and Mikkel. Like his parents, the unknown dies the Savior's death, destroying himself and the worlds to save them. I expected the bridge to go to 3 worlds and that there would be a third person on the bridge with Marta and Jonas. I'm surprised that it's Mikkel, but now that he's there, it makes complete sense for it to be him. He's close family to both Marta and Jonas and has a close, loving bond to both. He died so that Jonas could live on the prime world, and Marta and Jonas conspired to keep him alive on the alt world. So I just
Yeah,
thought that was really beautiful.
that absolutely is. Now, that was all happening in World 1,
Well,
right?
they're comparing the scenes from this episode to the
Yes.
Stargate scene. They're drawing a
Yes.
connection.
Well, what I'm asking though is like, because I'm really like getting like a clear vision now. Like you're saying, so Jonas and Martha upstairs in the room next to them is where Katerina and Mikkel are,
Mhm.
and that is all our 5 Stargate participants on the top floor. Think about that too, because the unknown is being conceived. So you were talking about Ulrich and Hannah as well. I'm not trying to like discount anything you were saying, but I was
Mhm.
thinking I don't really see how they tie in here, especially Ulrich. I mean, of course they tie in, but they're having intercourse too, but they're downstairs. And I was like, well, wait a second. Everybody's downstairs. The only people that are upstairs are our 5 Stargate crew. And that almost kind of makes sense. We can tie it back in with Christianity if you'd like. That they're like above everybody else. It's kind of like they're on their own plane on that bridge, and everybody else is kind of below them.
Mhm.
That's what I'm envisioning in my mind anyway.
Yeah, they're drawing some wild things, but I just like the fact that um who's in the Stargate, and then but they're trying to say they go more into this episode 2.6 thing. In that episode recap, they talk about these are the people that have the strongest connection, actually.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I don't agree with all of it, but it was interesting to say, like, oh yeah, Hannah does, she gets brought in the final episode, and then so there it's a reach to draw that. But I think they just were trying to find the connections between these 2 important episodes. But
Mhm.
yeah, I absolutely do agree with the whole thing about the people that are in the bridge and that being important. I still don't understand the statement about the unknown dies a savior's death, destroying him and the worlds to save them. But I guess maybe they're referring to the apocalypse.
It must be because like when he turned the key in the nuclear plant during that key moment, he must have
Mhm.
died.
Well, I thought that's what I thought too, but he's the old man. There's
Uh-huh.
the old man unknown. So the
Yeah, the old
middle-aged
man unknown
unknown
is with
couldn't.
the little boy, and then
Yeah.
he's like in a different world, and they're both turning the keys.
Yeah.
I don't have enough research under my belt
Yeah,
to like
the
answer that.
unknown is a mystery too. Like, I still don't understand if there is just one time, how do we have the 3 unknowns? That's
Mhm.
something it's a really somebody is gonna have to write a Reddit post about how we got 3 forms of the unknown.
That could be some damning proof that the loop actually is secular and not a one-time thing.
Let's just
I
ignore
mean,
it
that
for
could
right now then.
yeah. I don't want my mind blown again because it's already been blown a few times this episode.
Yeah. So, I think that's really all the fodder I have. I did wanna ask you,
Yeah.
like, when you're what does this all mean? What does this show mean to you? You know, what are the main themes you see in the show? We've already talked about Christianity. So let's keep going deep, like, when you if
Okay.
you were to say, like, what is this show about to you? Like, what are some things that come to mind?
I mean, if I were to, like, to try to wrap it up, like, in a sentence, which is, like, when somebody asks me what Dark is about, I usually tell them it's a show about time travel and the desire to change the past, and usually that's all I say. But that is, like, the sticking point for me is this is a time travel show, and I think anybody who is interested in time travel, especially somebody who would be so interested in time travel that they would write a show about it and, have this intricate web of characters that are involved in time travel. I think anybody who is interested in time travel is, maybe a person that has something that they see in their past that wants to be changed, or maybe it's a person that thinks that, like, um, there is a cycle that, like, I can get things better the next time around. I think it's just a compelling, subject, and that's the first thing that comes to my mind is time travel and the desire to change things. And I think I've made it clear that, like, the most effective way to make change is just to start a conversation with somebody. It's not to, sit here and wrench about what you should have done, years ago. It's like, what can you do now to, like, help yourself? But,
Mhm.
in our desires, we always want to, like, go back and say, oh, if I could have done that differently, things would be better for me now, or things would be so much different, or etc. That's my main takeaway is just change and the desire to make it.
Mhm.
And that's just surface level stuff. That's not even really going deep.
Yeah.
What would your surface level stuff be if somebody were to, like, ask you, like, what you think?
Sadly, I only have deep stuff.
Oh, okay, good. Well, I do too, but I wanted to start small.
I don't have any I mean, surface level, I would say the show's about grief. If I was gonna do
Right. That's the next thing I wrote down too.
an exploration, it's like a sci-fi exploration of grief. Yeah, but yeah, I
Well,
just
speak on
had
that.
some that's that. No, I would rather speak on my deep things, my deeper
Okay.
dives,
Oh, I'm
whatever.
sorry. I thought that was
Yeah,
I was going I thought that was
I've
getting
already
into it.
talked about, like, grief and how, how this show helped me process a lot of grief. So, I talked about that in the very first episode, that
Mhm.
it's quite for whatever reason, it's very comforting to watch this show when you're going through hard times, the same way as, you know, Mike Flanagan stuff is comforting, getting to see, his lens is usually horror, but he explores those same kinds of dark secrets in your family, and yeah. But I'll do some deep dives now if you don't mind.
I'd love it.
Okay. So, the first theme I had was free will versus determinism. The characters have different point of views on if they
Sure.
can change things or not, which you kind of already talked about, I guess. It's the will of Claudia that breaks the cycle, but part of the cycle trauma and suffering happened because one person, aka many people, refuse to let things go, and their desire to exert control exerts suffering on everyone in the town for hundreds of years. So I feel like the show seems to be saying that you can change things, but you should always stop to think about the repercussions for that. And
Hmm.
for Claudia, she was the strongest. She was just the person with the strongest will. So she got what she wanted, which was for Regina to be safe. Now, I could probably make an argument why Regina isn't the most important, but for Claudia, she was, and Claudia was the strongest and the queen. So at the end of the day, she was the one that got her reality pushed forward, and everybody else's reality and desires got pushed as underling things around underneath hers desire.
You wanted to talk about more themes of the show because I only talked about the time travel part of it and desire to change the past.
Change the
Yeah,
past, yeah.
what else you got for us besides the free will?
Okay, generational trauma.
Oh, okay.
Whatever trauma does not get resolved gets passed on to the next generation unless something
Sure.
interrupts and says no. Even when parents tried to protect their children from ugly things, and I thought of Charlotte and Peter, they were trying to protect their kids from the fact that their marriage was over. They were having a civil partnership, I guess, living together
Mhm.
and burying all of that stuff that was happening. The ugliness has a way of coming out and manifesting in a different way, and it was impacting
Oh,
Francisca big time.
sure.
It's better to handle things honestly instead of hoping things go away or pushing them under the rug.
And there's a lot of aspects of like animal nature that lends itself to that too. I'm thinking about like experiments they do like with mice where they'll have like a white piece of cheese and a yellow piece of cheese. And the white piece of cheese will shock you and the yellow piece of cheese you can eat. And so after a few generations of mice go by, eventually no mice even want to touch that white one that shocks them. Not because they've been shocked, but because their parents have been shocked and their grandparents have been shocked. So that's been passed down like in their DNA. Maybe not in their DNA, but it's been passed down like in somewhere in their nerve core that you don't touch that because it's been passed down from generations.
Mhm.
So that's like something that's like scientifically proven through like awful methods of like torturing animals. But
Yeah.
science has like proven that like these things can be like these intangible things can be passed down to your offspring.
Right.
Besides just like a mole or a cleft lip, you'll have um, sadness issues or etc.
Mhm. I guess the clearest example of this might be with Katerina and her mother. The
Ooh.
abuse that her mother put on her, and then
Mhm.
that abuse sort of lingers in her
Sure
treatment
does.
of Regina.
Mhm.
And in World 2, we joked she got therapy and got a therapy Bob and seems to have resolved some of that, and she seems to be more stable. So that was her dealing with her trauma, and then she didn't have to pass that on to her kids. But I just think that's a clear example. And then
Mhm.
the infidelity between Trant and Yana again gets passed to Ulrich. So there's just things that don't, these family secrets, if they aren't dealt with and addressed, then they just get passed on to the next generation and just they come out in other ways and impact your kids.
I wonder if World 2 Helena, who was Katerina's mom, might have had a different fate herself. And
Mm,
maybe she wasn't traumatized as a child, therefore World 2 Katerina wasn't quite as, high strung. Because World
yeah.
1 Katerina, even though, we basically thought she was a good mother, but yeah, she wailed off on Regina. She always had like these microaggressions that you would point out, like with Mikkel. And like I would be like, "Oh, she's just being funny." But I think she really was, had a lot of anger issues and they came out in these really strange ways. And then she like went off. She came into the bunker and like went off on everybody.
Hmm.
That's when she won my heart. Um that's that
The
makes a lot of
smack,
sense. That
the smack on the back of the head, even though it's not
exactly.
as,
Right.
it's not as hurtful. It is still means Mickles getting hit on the back of the head a bunch of
That's
times, and he
right.
probably didn't like it. So, trauma. The next theme I picked out was selflessness is the key. Any hope comes from selflessness and sacrifice. In order for Jonas and Martha to break the cycle, they had to put others' needs in front of theirs. They laid down their lives and existence to make the nightmare end. At times, Jonas does try to help others. He wants to help Mikkel, but then the stranger stops him from doing this because then he would never exist. But that's exactly what needed to happen. As sad as this is, the show seems to agree with Jonas's statement that he and Marta are wrong. They are the mistake. So that's a little bleak there at the end, but I think the hope there is that the selflessness, and Claudia sees this too.
Yeah.
She wants to save, she feels guilt that she wasn't a good mother to Regina, and so she's able to help her at the end. And so any of the goodness that happens in the show, it's because somebody's putting another person's need in front of theirs.
That's the first person I thought of was Claudia and Regina, because it seems like this whole thing is like based around Claudia trying to like make a better world for Regina. Um, and in turn for herself, maybe. I don't know. It's interesting how earlier in this very same podcast, we were talking about Jonas, and you were saying, like, from his perspective, he was doing things that benefited him. It's
Mhm.
like, he was very me central at that time. But now we're talking about the selflessness. I just think that's an interesting parallel that
Yeah.
we've turned 180 on that. But yeah, I'm trying to think who else. I know there's at least one character that always acts selflessly, and it's like in their nature, and it's like not clicking with me. So I'm not
Mhm.
catching it. I'm sorry.
Well, even Michael kills himself. The reason he does it is for his
There,
son.
yeah.
Yeah. But I'm sure there are other there are other instances that we're not able to pull from right now. But
There obviously is. I'm
yeah.
thinking about Hannah, how she's always kind to other people, and she doesn't have to do it. She's not really
To
benefiting
strangers.
herself.
She's
Yeah, it's
always
strange.
kind
Yeah,
to
if
strangers.
if you're her son or her lover, then forget about it. But
Mhm.
but yeah, she did act in that sort of way. And Tannhaus, the OG Tannhaus, like he did all this like for his Charlotte. That was like his goal was to like win his own Charlotte back way back in the 1800s. So
Mhm.
he was I don't know, you could look at that a different way. You could say like I want my Charlotte back for me so she will make me feel better. So I'm just
Yeah.
assuming that it's like selfless that he's doing that, but I think it falls along the lines there.
Yeah. And I guess Peter dying for his daughter too. Oh, that's a really
Fighting
sad
for her, yeah,
ending,
till the
but yeah.
very end.
And so then I just had one more theme: to never make yourself the main character of the story. This goes with the previous bullet point. Jonas spends 3 seasons of television believing the story is about him, only to discover he's a side character in someone else's story. We all suffer, but never believe your suffering is greater or more important than anyone else's.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a really me-centric person, I suppose. Like, I mean, it's true. I mean, I'm kind and I do think about other people, but no matter what, I wanna be happy. I wanna be comfortable.
Mhm.
So, if me, being kind to my family and helping them succeed helps me to be happy and succeed, it's almost like a selfish endeavor to, like, be kind to everyone so that I can have happiness.
Yeah. Well, I think about, it's not always about, um I guess maybe a more sensitive way to say this would be that I'm thinking back at that conversation Jonas had with Inez. And remember how he says, "Everybody's fine and I'm wrong."
Yes,
And
okay,
sometimes you cause more of your own suffering because you fail to see the bigger picture. Yes, you are suffering. You have something you're dealing
sure.
with, but the person next to you is also dealing with some pretty tough stuff as well. And sometimes I think what leads to a lot of our feelings of like oh, why is this happening to me? Okay, well, are
Mhm.
you maybe instead of focusing on yourself, turn to the person next to you and see what they're dealing with, and not saying yours won't be as bad. It's not a comparison game, but at the same time, we all suffer. We all have things we're dealing with. They always say, um, the person the person next to you is dealing with a battle you can't even see. And so
Right.
that would lead to like more kindness and empathy, and that we shouldn't always so part of being content or feeling more peace with life is realizing, yes, you're suffering, but you're not the only one who's suffering. And I think if Jonas had understood that, maybe he wouldn't feel as put upon that he's the only one that's having problems and everybody else's life is great. And that's just not true.
Right. Yeah, I wanna take this back to dark, but, now that we're talking about these themes, I wanna bring it back on myself again. Um, um, it's something that I struggle with too sometimes, just sadness, depression, and sometimes it's overwhelming. Something that I've learned, and I learned this from someone else, it was just a very simple statement, but it just stuck with me. It's like what's going on in my head during those times is like, I'm not good enough for these other people, like everybody thinks I suck, et cetera, et cetera. But in reality, I'm just a guy in a chair sitting there. That's all
Mhm,
I am. Like I can have all these negative thoughts and I can think about all my failures from 15 years ago, but really I'm just a guy in a chair. And if I want to make anything happen, then I have to get out of that chair. I can't just
mhm,
sit there and contemplate, because there's more going on than just me, exactly like what you were saying. Um,
mhm,
because even though, like, I might be sitting here in my head, like, thinking about an incident 15 years ago where I feel like I was a bad father, chances are if I ask Caleb about that same incident, he's like, "I don't even remember that." It's like that didn't even register with
mhm,
me because that has happened before where I'm like, "I'm really sorry about this one time that you were et cetera, et cetera." And he's like, "I don't know. I was just playing with
mhm,
Josh. That's all I was doing that day."
mhm,
And so we create these situations in our mind, but really it it's only our own perspective. We got to really zoom out.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm saying here. And
Mhm.
also knowing, when you sharing your story is making me think, well, depression can be so isolating too. You feel like
Sure.
nobody can understand what you're going through, but sometimes again, there is somebody that knows what you're going through and can relate, and
Mhm.
just knowing that can make you feel not so alone. But going back to the characters in Dark too,
Mhm.
that they made things worse because they didn't want to let things go.
Ah.
And the harder thing to do sometimes when something sad happens is to grieve. And grieving means you have to, let go, whatever that means. That can be such a over said statement, but you have to deal with the grief and accept that this has happened and move on. And none of the characters were really willing to do that because they made themselves the center of the story instead of saying, this is terrible, but it's happened. So what do I now have to do? Like, how should I live my life? Instead, they focused all their energy into trying to change the past because they weren't willing to face the reality
Sure.
of their present, and that takes a certain level of courage to do that.
It does. Yeah. I don't have a follow-up for you on that. I'm just I like it.
Yeah. Well, has this inspired you to find some more deep themes, Steve?
Well, obviously, yes. I mean, because the only themes that I wrote down were like the time travel, the desire to change the past, the grief of loss, and
Mhm.
then I just had like a bunch of just random, cool foreshadowing stuff. So I really want to go back and look at the clocks in
Mhm.
Tannhaus's shop, I want to go back and pay more attention when they get really dense and they're talking about really deep subjects, science, theory, even the Ariadne stuff. A lot of that was, guiding us in the right direction too, but some of it went over my head. So I'd like to go back and revisit some of that stuff too.
Mhm.
That's actually a play that actually exists that I wouldn't mind because I like those themes.
Yeah. You know what this is making me think of, Steve?
Hmm.
Is see, now you're in the position that I was when we started the podcast.
Okay.
So
How so?
you could start your own loop now. You could be like, find another sweet child that like you talk wanted to do with your sister. And then you would be the Lindsay, and there would be a new Steve, and that you would have to show them the light of all the things in the show and go back to the things you missed because, even me, I just like I the clocks, I found that. So we all know you could go back and start the show all over again and have the new perspective now that I've watched this whole show, now I can go back and watch it again. So you could start podcast duh and start it all over again, have it your own loop. But you just be in the
I
other position.
I like this idea a lot. I've actually thought a really fun podcast idea would be just to have a different guest on every week and make them watch Dark season 1, episode 1. And that's just all I do is just talk to everybody about that
Oh,
one episode and just hopefully get them into the show. That would be the point. But then just get everybody's different perspectives of it. My sister does not like this. Like, I don't even know if she's going to be able to come on the podcast because she didn't make it past the first couple of scenes of the show. This is not for her. This is
oh dear.
cathartic for people like you and me and for Heather. Like we like these like heavy themes. It helps us, just gets us wrapped into it. My sister
Mhm.
likes to watch reality shows that are like, just silly and just over the top personalities, and that helps her like
Mhm.
forget her reality and that helps her escape. Whereas a show
Mhm.
like this just makes her feel sad and she doesn't want to feel sad. So it's not for
Mm.
everybody.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, you're inspiring me. I'm gonna go off on another wing here. I know next week we're not gonna be talking dark. We're doing something fun next week where we're bringing in our boy Nate
Hey,
and we're
dark is
gonna
fun. Dark is fun, Steve. You said we're gonna be doing something fun.
Is that kinda like how I led that sentence trying to say that is that the insinuation that I
Oh
made? Is
god.
that dark is not fun?
I let me tell you I gotta tell you a quick story. Oh my
Okay.
gosh. Back when I was a children's librarian that worked in an actual library. I'm still a children's librarian, I just don't work at the library. But I once heard a parent make a terrible mistake verbally, and I was like, they said, "Let's go to story time, and then we can do something fun afterwards." And I
Yeah.
thought, "What are you teaching your children?"
That
I
is
didn't say anything
backwards.
to her, but I thought that was really funny. I was like, "Now your child's not gonna think story time's not fun now. Good job, mom. You just told your children that the library is boring." But go ahead,
I'm hoping
Steve.
that child grows up and tells, like, their friend, like, "Can you believe my mom said this to me? Like, story time isn't fun?" That is crazy. But yes, we're gonna do something equally as fun. We're gonna be podcasting, but we're gonna be the plan is to watch Jesus Christ Superstar, going back on the Christianity theme, and me and Nate and Lindsay are gonna discuss that film, not necessarily recap it.
This is for Yeah, this is
Yes,
for our music movie series as well, maybe. We're not talking about it because of Christianity, although that theme might come up, but we're gonna do a few movies that are music movies, movies that have connected to music somehow, so that'll be the first
that's
one.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Lindsay, did you have any plugs for this week or anything you want to direct people towards?
The only plug I have for this week is if you have an opportunity, please go out and see the movie Origin. I feel like this is a
Oh,
really important movie and it's worth seeing. And then my my worry now is somebody told me if I say something's an important movie, they're gonna think it's not a good movie, it's just important. Just like we just used the word fun to not describe dark, but
Right.
it's an important movie, but it's also a good and beautiful movie. So, I just encourage you to go out into the theater if you can, or it should be available on streaming now. Not sure on a particular platform. You might have to rent it, pay that actual $3.99 on Amazon, God forbid,
Oh no.
but see that one if you can. I haven't done a full review of it anywhere, but I think it's a really beautiful movie and an important movie. Yeah.
Are you going to be doing a review of it? Sounds like you should.
Well, I put it on my top movies of the year list, so I did a
Oh,
short
okay.
capsule review. I may do a podcast discussion rather than do a review just because there's a lot of things to chew on. Yeah, it's based on a best-selling book called Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. That book is a nonfiction about the system of caste and how she believes it connects different periods of history that don't seem like they're connected, like the Jim Crow laws, Nazi Germany, the Dalits in India or the Untouchables, and slave ships and lynchings. So different periods of injustice in history. But rather than make a nonfiction documentary that would be exactly like the book, they made it into a narrative feature about the author's life, what was going on in her life when she wrote the book. And so it goes into her um, the challenges she was dealing with at the same time and how those challenges kind of led to the shape that the book took. So it's just a very fascinating story, but it's going to I feel like it's going to let people know about some things going on in the world that they might not have ever heard of before.
Hmm,
So, yeah.
that's what films do. I like that.
Mhm.
Okay. We'll take that one home then. Origins. I is oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I think I just said it wrong. Is it origin or origins?
Origin, singular.
Or singular. Okay. I'm glad I clarified that. So nobody's watching the wrong movie now. Okay. I don't have any plugs myself, just this podcast and Lindsay's podcast, One of My Stories. You always need to be checking out her website and checking that podcast out too. You should be subscribed to both. I hope you are. I am. Um, but yeah, that's all we have for you this week. We'll see you next week when we talk about that Jesus Christ Superstar. And until then, I hope everybody finds water and shade and shoes. Lindsay, thank you for joining me. And you always find some water, shade, and shoes as well.
You too, Steve. You too.
Thank you. Me too. Bye, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye.